Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my big year-end finale episode. This is the show where I'm going to give you guys my top 16 albums of the year. Quite excited to dive into it. Just as a preamble, these are my favorite albums. They're not objectively what was the best according to most people. This is just the albums that moved me and touched me deeply this year. And instead of ordering it, just giving a rundown of number 20 to number 1 or whatever, like most other YouTubers and reviewers tend to do, I thought it'd be fun to put them in a tournament style and to kind of see what is pit against each other and what comes out on top. It helps give you a look into my process and hopefully makes this video a bit of a fun exercise, but I'll try to go through it fairly quickly so this doesn't take forever. And I also wanted to mention that the albums on the wall behind me are actually my favorite records from last year, since I have my albums from this year in a stack beside me, and I'm going to showcase them as we go through my list. But I wanted to give you an idea of my taste and kind of honor last year's members of the tournament before we move forward and honor a 2024 winner. So thought it'd be fun. Last year's winner was Himmelbach Volume 2 by Moon Safari, which is above my head there. So fabulous record, and we'll see what tops the tournament this year. So I'm excited to dive into it. And let's get into the first matchup. So I'm going to show off my physical copies. There's a couple that I don't have physical copies of quite yet, but for most of them I have something I can hold up and show you guys. Firstly, we have Caligula's Horse, Charcoal Grace versus the Lemon Twigs, A Dream Is All We Know. So Caligula's Horse, this is the album here. Charcoal Grace, fantastic prog metal album. It fulfilled that gap that I needed from like a band like Haken that I tend to put on my year-end list. I wasn't too familiar with Caligula's Horse actually going into this record, and it really blew me away. They have a very mature sound. I think they really did something incredible with this record. They have some lengthier pieces. They have this big signature epic in the middle that's broken up into different parts, and it just has an incredible quality to it. It's very emotional. The vocalist is just fantastic throughout the record, and I just really felt this one deeply. I think it's a fabulous record that is one of the best of the year. Fantastic effort from these guys. And it's going up against the Lemon Twigs, A Dream Is All We Know, which is probably the least prog on the list. You know, I know people are probably thinking, isn't this a prog album tournament? And this is clearly not prog, but it's one of the albums that really struck me the most this year. Just for some reason, it really spoke to me. It has that kind of classic Beatles, Beach Boys type quality. They have this throwback style that they really do super well. Every song is really fantastic. It breezes by. It's like a 30-minute album, really. And every song is just a blast to listen to and reminds me of kind of this nostalgia of the early days of music, of, you know, how I used to love that classic late 60s, early 70s stuff. So for me, the winner of this battle is actually going to be the Lemon Twigs, A Dream Is All We Know. I just absolutely love this record. It's probably one of my most played records of the year because it's just so fun and easily accessible, something my wife can enjoy. This is probably her favorite album of the year, honestly, because she's a huge Beach Boys fanatic, and that can be heard on the sound in spades. So it's a fun record, and I wanted to feature it on my list. Next battle, this is quite an interesting one. This is Opeth's Last Will and Testament versus Meer, Wheels Within Wheels. So this is the newest album on the list. It just came out last month in November, a bit of a delayed release. Opeth has been a band that has always been interesting to me because I don't really care for the heavy death metal growling vocals. That's clearly something I've talked about a lot on my channel. But I love the musicianship. I love the energy that they have in their compositions. I love the light and shade, how they have like more acoustic moments measured with these heavier, darker moments. And it's just a brilliant combination, and I really love this record. I think it knocks it out of the park of blending their newer proggier style with kind of their classic death metal sound, just in drips and drabs, just enough to make me happy as a listener and not be overwhelmed by the metal side of their equation. I feel like it's gotten a bit of a mixed response. When it first was being talked about by critics, I feel like critics were pretty positive about it, but over time, people have, you know, been a little bit unsure if they're a big fan of this or whatnot. I think it's because it separates kind of the metal fans versus the prog fans, And I'm tending to see that people who are more into the prog side tend to like this quite a bit, and people who lean more towards just the metal side maybe were left a little bit cold, which isn't, it's not, a clear one for one, but I love the prog side. I think it's wildly ambitious, and it's a great concept record and has so much going for it that I just can't help but keep it in my list here and put it in at this spot. But it's going up against a powerhouse for me for this year, and that's Meer's album, Wheels Within Wheels, which I absolutely adore. This is a band that's risen in my estimation. They actually won this tournament a few years ago with their previous album, Playing House, in 2021, and I think this improves upon it in almost every way. I love their blend of like poppier prog music, but they add like orchestration that's just super beautiful. They have a violin, viola players in the band, a brother-sister combo on vocals who are just both fantastic singers. It's cinematic, it's majestic, it's beautiful, it's expansive, and it's everything I love about music and wrapped in one convenient package here that I just adore. And I think it's pretty clear Meer's Wheels Within Wheels moves on to the next stage of the tournament. A brilliant album. Everyone needs to check this out, I think. Really great album that I really fell in love with this year. Wanted to highlight that. The next battle, Kyros' Mannequin versus Beardfish, Songs for Beating Hearts. So first we have Kyros here. Brilliant, colorful album art. I love this. And the music on board is just as colorful and interesting. Once again, it has kind of a poppier undertone, but it's purely prog. There's definite tracks that just really embrace a pure progginess that's fun and exhilarating. But I love this kind of synth pop aesthetic that they put underneath it that makes a lot of these songs catchy and fun to listen to. Things that hook you in, that make you want to continue listening to the songs over and over again. I think their performances are excellent, and I love the blend. I love how they have these kind of poppier, shorter songs blended with some expanded pieces that go more into the proggier bits that I love them for. They have a little bit of elements of like Frost in their makes when they go full on prog, but then they never sacrifice kind of that synth 80s aesthetic as well. Just a fun band, having a ton of fun, making a great record, and I just adore it. I love this record. I think it's been a lot of fun to listen to this year. And we've got the return of one of my favorite bands, Beardfish, that it's up against. I love this record as well. I think it was a welcome return. The band had broken up quite a while back, but are back together for this record. And it's a solid album from their discography. They're one of my favorite prog bands. They have a cool, quirky epic on here. They have a couple of lengthy songs that just hit the mark perfectly well, this blend of cool classic rock with a proggy sensibility. They have a quirkiness not unlike a Frank Zappa or a Gentle Giant, but grounded in just excellent songwriting and a great vocalist. And I just love this record. I thought it was a ton of fun and a solid return to form. It's not my favorite of the Beardfish canon. I think they have better records than this, and maybe that's what squeezes Kyros' album ahead of this one in the tournament. I'm picking Kyros as the winner of this battle. It's just a fresh, new, exciting, young sound that I couldn't get enough of, that became even better as I continued to listen through it throughout the year. So I'm putting Kyros up ahead in the next part of the tournament. Now we've got Ritual, Story of Mr. Bogt, Part 1, and Neil Morse and the Resonance, No Hill for a Climber, as our next battle. Ritual, a fantastic album. This is a return to form after quite an absence away. They have a bit of a folkier touch, definite undertones of Gentle Giant, and maybe a bit of like Jethro Tull kind of style, a little bit of Yes and Genesis, all of that mixture in a wonderful kind of Swedish prog package. Love their sound. I loved their album, Humulic Voluntary Band was one of the ones that really brought me into this group. So I was excited. It's a concept record, has a really cool story to it. It's a part 1, so it makes me excited to see what happens in part 2. But it's just supremely solid, quirky, fun, beautiful music. They run the gamut between these interesting storytelling pieces and some really quirky, fun instrumental bits and some more soundscapey kind of landscape building sections as well that allows the music to be a bit more expansive and majestic. It has all the things that you want in prog, and it's highly recommended. All prog fans should hear this. It's a fabulous record, but it's up against like one of my favorite artists of all time. Everyone's well aware. I love Neil Morse, and he came out with a record that surprised me. He isn't able to work with the Neil Morse band at the moment, so he's brought on a host of younger gentlemen to help him with this project called The Resonance, people he knows in like local Nashville scene. And they crafted a brilliant album with 2 big epics and a couple shorter songs sandwiched in between, and it has all the hallmarks of Neil Morse's epic Prog. Has some really cool new fresh things from the Resonance members that bring a little different element to the sound, even though it is kind of that typical Neil Morse structure that we're very familiar with at this point. But to hear a record that harkens back to some of the best of the Neil Morse band, after some albums that haven't hit me quite as well, some of his more musical theater type albums with Joseph, parts 1 and 2, this one really hit, and I was really excited to get into this and have classic proggy epic Neil Morse back on the table. So this is moving forward. Should be pretty obvious. Neil Morse and the Resonance moves on to the next part of the tournament, No Hill for a Climber. Next battle, as we move into kind of the second half of the equation here, is and their album Collapse the Wave, and then Big Big Train's The Likes of Us. But first is Collapse the Wave, a band that needs a lot more attention, one of my favorite modern prog bands. They're from the US, and they just have a fun, quirky style, but I love how they make the music all their own. Really, it's mostly just comprised of shorter tracks. There isn't really an epic here like there has been on a couple of their previous albums, but I think every song is exciting and interesting. They have like male-female vocals once again. It's a duo of brothers that really leads the charge in the songwriting department, and they just do an excellent job and bring a lot of classic prog sounds, but do it in a new and exciting, different way. There's some really Chris Squire-style bass all throughout. There's some Gentle Giant quirkiness. There's some ELP-style keyboards as well. It's just all really fun and all really well developed and well done, and I really love and appreciate this record. And then we've got Big Big Train coming out with The Likes of Us, which has been out for quite some time. This came out earlier in the year, but this was the introduction of a new version of their lineup with Alberto Bravin as their new frontman after the unfortunate passing of David Lungden, who was their former frontman. And I think because of that, a lot of people dismiss this as not quite as good because they were so infatuated with David Lungden and his style, and it was such an important part of the band, which I totally agree. But I felt like the band really knocked it out of the park with this. This is a triumphant album by them. They were able to take what was a difficult situation and rise out of those ashes and create something that was fun, enjoyable, that didn't sacrifice the hallmarks of their classic sound. I love the epic on here, Beneath the Mass, is one of their all-time classic songs that will stand the test of time in their catalog, in my opinion. But beyond that, there's just so many beautiful melodies. Alberto Bravin has such a great quality to his voice. And seeing them live on Cruise to the Edge really solidified my opinion that this is an excellent record, that the band's in a very healthy place right now. They're kind of an all-star lineup of musicians, one of the coolest prog collectives that exists out in the world right now, champions for modern prog that I respect, and so on. And so that is why this is moving on in the tournament. I can't help but put Big Big Train into the next stage. Love this record, and I don't care what anyone says. I think it's a fabulous step in a new direction that showcases some really exciting new things for the band. Next on the docket here is Dirt Poor Robins and their album Firebird, and John Anderson and the Band Geeks and the album True. Dirt Poor Robins, Firebird, I have it on order. I've paid for it on their Kickstarter, so I'm eagerly anticipating the album coming at some point in the near future. But for now, I'll just put a graphic here and talk about an incredible record. Dirt Poor Robins, once again, maybe one of the bands that aren't capital P prog on this list, but I think they really fulfill that progressive rock aesthetic because they blend different genres and bring it all into their wheelhouse. They build these concepts that are really cool and singular. They have a certain vibe to them that just works in their world. I love bands that just have their own musical world, and no matter what style they're grabbing from, what genre, whether it be synth pop, whether it be, classic rock of the 70s, whether it be, even vaudevillian styles and old opera, they're able to infuse it into their sound and make it all sound cohesive. And it's just a cool magic trick that they're able to pull off. I love the aesthetic of this record. It brings a bit more of an 80s synth pop edge to what they had done before, but doesn't sacrifice what the band's known for. I love the male-female vocals, the cinematic quality, the storytelling, and it just creates a really fun record that balances these kind of sweeping, more operatic, more cinematic pieces with some really fun, groovy tracks as well, and creates this really fascinating blend that just works for my ears. But then we have it against John Anderson and the Band Geeks. True. This is a fantastic record. The return to form from John Anderson. At his age, it was really remarkable that he came out with such a strong album that's probably one of the best things that any Yes member has come out with in quite some time. Some great epics here. The band geeks are just fabulously supporting John Anderson and sounding excellent. They're pulling off a really cool magic trick here of playing music that's in the classic style of Yes, but doing it in a way that's unique to them and brings it into the modern age and gives it its own special qualities. Doesn't sound too derivative, but it gives you all those feelings that classic Yes would give you. I feel like it's kind of a nod to all eras of Yes. You know, there's stuff in here that sounds like classic 70s, but also 80s Trevor Rabin era and some of the like 90s, like the latter era stuff as well. And it just comes together in a brilliant way. John Anderson just gives this all a cohesion and brings it all into his musical framework. This kind of style that he's known for is all over this record and is a lot of fun to behold. But I'm actually giving this to Dirt Poor Robins for my personal taste. I just think Dirt Poor Robins is an underrated group that pulled together an incredible concept record that should be heard by more people and really impressed me this year. So I'm moving on Dirt Poor Robins into the next stage. Now we've got Frost, Life in the Wires versus Sleepmakeswaves. It's here, but I have no names for it. Frost, Life in the Wires, I think is a triumph for the band. Just a fantastic record that kind of takes all of the qualities of Frost up to this point and blends them together, but puts it forward into a new way that makes this stand out in their catalog. It's a sprawling double disc concept record, so there's a lot of material here, but it all works fantastically well. There's some nods back to Million Town with some of the epic pieces on here, some of the soloing and frantic playing. It has that still kind of frosty aesthetic that they're known for. It's hard to even put into words, this kind of iciness in their production style and in their sound. Fantastic playing, has a bit of that kind of 80s synth feel as well in some of the pieces. Every piece stands out and has its own kind of cool melodies and concepts about it that make it stand out and not just wash amidst all of the material. It's a lot to dive into and a lot to digest, but pays dividends when you take the time to really uncover and unpack its hidden depths, and has a great storyline to it. I am a sucker for concept albums, so I really was impressed with this one. But then we've got Sleepmakeswaves. It's here, but I have no names for it. And maybe one of the more unconventional picks on the list, more in a post-rock direction, mostly instrumental. But I put this on the list because it really impressed me. It's something that I didn't know that I needed. You know, I'm not typically a big post-rock fan, so this really surprised me and brought that into my attention. I think it's a fabulous record. It has some hard-hitting sections. That's what I thought was cool about this record is typically when I think of post-rock, I think it's just more mellow and more atmospheric, and it just drones on for too long. But this record is hard-hitting. There's some really exciting sections. There's a lot of variety on order, and they go through a lot of different cool musical landscapes, and it makes for a fascinating, cool experience as a listener. And I've just really played the heck out of this record throughout the year. But I am going to award Frost at this spot and put Frost as the one moving forward in this battle. Just can't deny one of my favorite bands coming forward with one of their best records and doing this really ambitious feat and succeeding on every level. So Frost moves forward. And our final battle in this first round is Azure and the album Fim, and Professor Caffeine and the Insecurities, their self-titled record. So Fim is another really fascinating record from this year. Another concept record, kind of in like a Dungeons and Dragons style. This band has kind of their own world that all their albums inhabit. And I was really blown away by this. It has kind of that modern prog aesthetic of bands like Deer Hunter, Thank You Scientist, you know, that kind of family, but has a little bit of a metal edge like a band like Haken at times as well. A vocalist who's just off the charts fantastic, goes into all these kind of operatic runs and crazy things. It's super dense, it's a lot to take in, and can sometimes feel a little bit overwhelming, but I'm really impressed by the scope and scale of this record and how fun it is to listen to and how sprawling and ambitious it is. So this really impressed me. The other one, which I don't have, I think it only exists as a digital version, is Professor Caffeine and Insecurities. Their self-titled record. I don't know. This was hard to decide between this and a couple other records of what to fit into the tournament. But this just kept grabbing me. It's more along this kind of modern prog edge also, kind of like a Coheed and Cambria meets Thank You Scientist vibe. But I really love what they do. They have some cool grooves. They have songs that are much more in a poppier vein and really hook you in, but then they don't sacrifice some of the progginess in some of the other tracks. There's a full-on prog metal instrumental track on here that blows me away every time I listen to it. So it's just a fun listen that I just listened to a lot this year, so I couldn't deny that it should belong in my tournament. But that being said, I think Azure's Femme takes the lead on this bracket and moves on in the tournament. So those are the 16 albums. I've talked through them all. Now let's quickly go through the rest of the tournament and see what is declared the winner here. So next, we have Lemon Twigs, A Dream Is All We Know versus Meer's Wheels Within Wheels. And I love the Lemon Twigs. I love their throwback style, and I listen to this record probably more than any other, but Meer has something special that touches me deeply that I can't quite describe, this magical sensation that I think they capture better than a lot of other bands in the scene, and so Meer is clearly the winner for me, moving on to the next phase of the tournament. We have Kyros' Mannequin versus Neil Morse and the Resonance, No Hill for a Climber. This is a tough one. I love these records both dearly. It's like the fresh-faced young new artist versus the established veteran. And I'm going with the younger, fresh-faced artist. I'm going with Kyros Mannequin, with maybe the first big upset of the tournament for people that know me and know my Neil Morse fanaticism. But I just am super impressed with Kyros and what they put on display here. They're a fantastic new band that I am super excited to follow, and pushing them a little bit over the edge was this little mini EP that recently came out that added a couple new great songs to their makes of great music this year. So I love Mannequin, and it moves on in the tournament. Next, we've got Big Big Train, The Likes of Us versus Dirt Poor Robin's Firebird. This may be another slight upset for many of you classic prog fans, but I'm going with Dirt Poor Robin's here, Firebird. I think it's a bit more unique. I love their style. I love the concept. I love how it inhabits its own world and showcases this cool cinematic quality. And it's just a lot of fun to listen to. As much as I love Big Big Train, and this hurts me to not move them on to the Final Four, I just think Dirt Poor Robin's impressed me a little bit more, was a little bit more fun to listen to, and I think Big Big Train in this iteration has even more exciting things ahead of them that they'll be doing on future records. So I'm going to move on Dirt Poor Robin's. And then finally, Frost, Life in the Wires versus Azure's Femme. Another close race, two albums that I think are really fantastic, big sprawling concept records that deserve acclaim and attention. I'm going to give it to Frost in this case, Life in the Wires. I think it just impressed me on a different level. And when one of my favorite all-time bands comes out with maybe their crowning achievement as artists, I can't help but put that forward and be excited to award them with a Final Four spot here. So this is very telling. This is my Final Four. Meer's Wheels Within Wheels, Kyros' Mannequin, Dirt Poor Robin's Firebird, and Frost, Life in the Wires. If you throw in the Big Big Train record, that's easily my top five that soared above the rest and were the five records that really mattered to me this year. The first battle here, Meer's Wheels Within Wheels versus Kyros' Mannequin. Pains me to do this. These are two of my all-time favorite records of the year. I think they both could be in the conversation as best record for me. Either one would be a fantastic winner of this tournament, but I'm going with Meer. It's probably become obvious, but Wheels Within Wheels, when it came out, just blew me away. It put them on a whole nother level, and I was already very high on the band, as is evidenced in where I placed their previous album on my list. And this just took it to another stage, and I'm super impressed. But Kyros deserves all the praise as well. Please check that album out. Mannequin is fantastic, a wonderful record that deserves all the acclaim, and maybe on a different day I might have put that ahead, but today it's Meer's album that deserves the nod into that final two. And then the other battle, Dirt Poor Robin's Firebird versus Frost, Life in the Wires. This is probably the hardest choice here of the whole tournament. I love these records very equally. I think they're both brilliant in their own ways. I'm giving the nod slightly to Dirt Poor Robin's Firebird. I know maybe not all of you will agree with me. I think probably most viewers will respect the Frost record a bit more. Dirt Poor Robin's, I think, is moving forward because it's my personal favorite. I give an edge to bands that just are personal favorites of mine that I champion, that don't seem to get the love that they deserve from the wider community. And I feel like Dirtport Robbins deserves to be one of the premier prog acts, and for some reason a lot of people don't seem to talk about them in that sort of a way. So I want to give them the nod and give them that final 2 spot. Fantastic album. I loved it. I think it's a great concept record and just has such a fun vibe to it, and a fantastic finale. I don't think I've talked enough about how that Firebird ending with that Firebird suite used to epic heights is just fantastic ending. One of my favorites of the year. So the final battle here is Meer's Wheels Within Wheels versus Dirtport Robbins' Firebird, and it's a close race. Like I said, any of the top 5 could have won. Frost could have won in a different universe. Kyros could have won in a different universe. But I'm going with Meer, Wheels Within Wheels. And I really struggled with doing this. I knew it was the deserving winner, and if I'm being honest with myself, my favorite record. But I almost considered not giving it the win because I gave it the win a few years ago, and I love to spread the wealth around. I like to give various artists their flowers when they deserve it. But Meer put out such a fabulous record that touched me emotionally, has some signature pieces that I'll never forget, and the band just soared to new heights in a way that impressed me. It came to me, this album, at a low of the year, and really lifted up my spirits, and I had a lot of emotion tied into this record, and the more I listened to it, the more it uncovered these hidden depths. It's beautiful on a first listen, but has even more under the surface, and for that reason, I have to award it the number 1 spot. It's my favorite record of the year, bar none. And there you have it, my number 1 record, Meer's Wheels Within Wheels. So hopefully you enjoyed this style, this tournament. In the description, I'm going to put my typical 16 album list, so you could just see it from 16 to 1 if that's more what you're into. But I think this is a fun exercise. Hopefully you guys will agree. And hopefully you guys will catch me on the channel. This might be my last episode for this year. I'm probably going to take a little bit of a break for the holidays. Maybe I'll do a couple things with Jana or some reaction episodes, but we're still discussing it. I plan to come hard and have a lot of cool content for next year. Hopefully you guys will stick with me. Hopefully I can grow the channel a little bit more. I felt things stagnated a little bit this year, and I'm not quite sure why, but I'm going to try to revamp and refresh and do some new fun things that hopefully you guys will enjoy in the new year. So thank you guys so much for all your support, for a wonderful year of music. Let me know in the comments your top choices, your favorite albums of this year. Tell me how I got it wrong if you must, but be kind and realize that this is just my preferences. And like I said, I could have swapped out any of these choices because all of these albums are brilliant in their own right. So thank you guys, and thank you to these bands and these artists who make this fabulous music. It's such a joy to be able to discover great new music and to interact with great new bands who are doing it. So thank you guys. Thank you to the bands. Thank you to the fans. Thank you to the subscribers. And thank you to a fabulous year. Bye, everybody. Enjoy the music.